There's been pretty mixed reactions to the new Elden Ring DLC, both a sea of praise saying it's the greatest thing ever and it paid off my mortgage, and people saying it's the worst thing ever and it drove my car off a bridge. I'd like to throw my hat in the ring and try to shed some light on the situation for both sides involved. It feels stupid to be the can't we all just get along person, and I know the internet is going to do their internet thing and be mad about everything, but I think we can both analyze our media to improve future works and also be positive and take joy in what we do. I'm trying to be more positive lately, so I'm going to list both the positives and the negatives of the DLC. If you want to just listen to the half of the discussion you agree with or you disagree with or whatever, you can just skip to the part that's timestamped. But my goal here is not to prove one side right or wrong, but to help both sides understand where the other is coming from. Alright? Great. Really quick for those who aren't familiar, Elden Ring is made by From Software, the company that made the Dark Souls series, which is known for being very hard, yes, but also great interconnected level design, excellent bosses, detailed lore and environmental storytelling, and fair, satisfying challenge. They've also made similar games that very much carry the same DNA, which leads us to Elden Ring. Some of the games have also had downloadable content as expansions in the past, and they are very often considered to be the best part of their respective games, particularly in terms of the bosses. Alright, you're caught up on the important bits. So to start, I want to shed some light on the positives, because this DLC has a lot of what also made the base game great. First of all, the art design and direction, top notch even by From Software standards. The Shadow Tree, which yes, it's spelled like that and pronounced like that, is dark and ominous in the center, contrasting with the Erdtree of the base game. The literal veil of shadow cast over the land. The opening area, a mass grave in a field, smoldering ruins all over the place. An early encounter with a furnace golem, which is huge and intimidating, and paints this clear picture of how these villages were decimated, leaving behind these literal shadow people to wallow in despair, and the design of Mesmer the Impaler. Ugh, chills down my spine. Also, Smash. Like, come on, let's be real. Smash. Like, Miyazaki was at the drawing board. Like, okay, how do we make the coolest shit they've ever seen? Well, I guess he would have said that in Japanese, but you know what I mean. It's all beautiful. It's evocative imagery. It makes you feel things in your gut, or at least it does for me. Next, all of the new weapon types and spells are some of the most fun I've had in a FromSoft game. The martial arts have crazy spinning kicks and palm strikes, way more fun than the fist weapons of the base game. The light greatswords have the speed of the lighter weapons and the reach of the greatsword, and I love the animations, like the flow of an elegant dancer. And there are throwing weapons too, that you can attack with infinitely with no FP cost. So now it's actually possible to support a mid-ranged physical weapon playstyle. And of course, new spells. I haven't played around with most of them, but crazy light spells, new fire spells, rotten butterflies, wrath from afar, new gravity sorceries, thorn sorceries. Man, it's some good stuff. All of them are not only flashy and cool, but each one helps you fulfill a specific character fantasy. Want to play an elegant fencer type? We've got that. A disciplined monk? We've got that too. One of the perfumers? A mage that specializes in gravity magic or fire magic or light or whatever kind you're choosing? Even outside of the new weapon types, there are new weapons for the old types that include extra little modifiers, like the Black Knight Great Hammer has an extra holy blast on the guard counter attacks. That's super sick. The most exciting part, honestly, is knowing FromSoft wants to keep making new weapons like this, so whatever game they make next will probably have it all over the place, and it'll have a lot of really cool playstyles, and God, I'm so excited. The music, by the way, for both the atmosphere and the boss battles, absolutely incredible. I don't want to rant about them too long. I'd prefer you just listen for yourselves, but it's also emotional, and I know I used the word evocative earlier, but I think it's still true. And there are some truly great bosses here, by the way. Mesmer is perhaps my new favorite FromSoft boss because he's very hard, but he's not just fair, he's consistent. When the spears come up from the ground, it'll be after a triple stab, every time. When he has an attack followed by a big area blast, you'll want to wait a split second before rolling to dodge it, every time. When he does a stab move where he arches his back a bit, that's the end of his combo, every time. There's more that I could list, but I think you get the gist of it. Some other hits for me personally. Ramina, Saint of the Bud, has a bomb-ass design, some really cool attacks like the big stinger and the area butterflies. Also, Smash. The Demi-Human Swordmaster, which I believe is brand new. It was just a mini-boss, but it was still so cool and memorable. It was like fighting Wolf from Sekiro. Average enemy designs are great too. There are some reused enemies and assets from the base game, but it's pretty natural. There were very few instances that were like groan-worthy. I'm not gonna just keep on listing things that I think were cool. I think you get the point. Overall, there's a lot of great content in this DLC. I'd say a solid 75-80% of it is just really good stuff, and for a lot of people, this can outweigh any negatives there might be. That being said, there are negatives to talk about. There are two main issues that I personally have noticed, and I want to talk about them together because in this DLC they're heavily linked. Exploration and difficulty. If we look at the base game real quick, the opening area of Limgrave worked so well because you have so many potential directions to go in, and there's almost always something interesting to find. You can go to Caelid, Weeping Peninsula, Stormvale, or any number of small forts, caves, or dungeons in between without even needing to find any secret passageways. And if you do find those, that opens up even more options for you. In general, you can just pick a direction and keep going until you're like, how did I even get here? Gravesite Plain, the first area in the DLC, however, has a lot more walls. Not literal walls, but places where the player just has to turn around. You go south, there's some enemies and items, but nowhere to go from there. Turn right around. Go northwest to Bellerot, and it's a cool legacy dungeon. You fight the Dancing Lion, but after that, shadowy thorns in your way, turn around. Go north, you find some ruins, but overall, not much. Turn around, you get the idea. You can only go east, leading to Castle Ensis. Yes, there's a hidden path around Castle Ensis, or you can go in the direction of Cerulean Coast, but both of these are tucked away in the corner far enough for someone to very easily miss it, unlike the main paths in the base game. I only found one of those two without a guide, and that was after I was at Castle Ensis for like an hour, slamming my head against the figurative wall, which leads me to talk about the difficulty. I think many people taking part in the difficulty discussion at the moment are missing the point. It's not about being really hard is a good thing, or being really hard is a bad thing. It's about the way that it's hard. The enemies here have mostly well-telegraphed attacks, but even after learning their moves, they're still hard to deal with because their damage numbers are so high. Even with a number of durability boosters like full heavy armor and talismans, these enemies still do like a third of my health in one swing. And then there's this guy, Moonrithil, which is such a terrible name by the way. He'd do half of my health or more per swing, and I only take off 5% of his HP with a critical backstab. I know the moveset and I'm mostly playing well, but the margin for error is so low and it takes forever slashing away at him, dodging the same few attacks. And you might think, so you don't like that it's hard, and no, if I didn't like difficulty, I wouldn't be a Souls-like fan in the first place. The problem is that it's a slog. When I win, I don't go, yeah, I did it. I go, ugh, glad that's over. The issue is about as bad for a number of bosses too, and that's not to mention that some of these bosses and enemies have very long combos that can last 5 or more attacks, leaving very few windows to attack back. And also, maybe I'm doing something wrong, but some enemies like Commander Gaius, I swear will just attack over my shield. Like I'm locked on, I'm holding the shield button, and my shield does nothing. And I'm like, hello? Is this thing on? And you look for advice online, and one person says, this boss is designed to punish shield turtling, so you'll have to dodge roll. And the second will say, this boss is designed to punish roll spammers. You have to block with your shield. Like, yes, very cool. Thank you, Reddit. It's becoming this insane arms race between players and enemies, to the point where we're beginning to lose what made that challenge fun in the first place. The point isn't just for it to be hard, or that we need to get good. It's that the challenge facilitates the fun. In short, there's a lot of places in this DLC where it's not fun difficulty. So yes, everything here does truckloads of damage, but FromSoft presents to us a solution. These are called Shadow Tree Fragments. Yes, again, it's pronounced like shadow for some reason. Anyways, by collecting them, we can raise our Shadow Tree Blessing, raising the damage you deal and resist specifically in the DLC area. For reference, against Moonrithil, my Blessing level was at like 3 or 4, and against Gaius, I believe it was at 9. The idea is that it makes us powerful enough to match the enemies in the DLC without throwing us off the base game's level, all while encouraging exploration to find them all. And a few days after the initial launch, and only after I played most of the DLC, there was a patch release that increased the scaling on the earlier levels of the Blessing. In order to make the earlier areas less of a hassle, there are still some problems with this, however. First of all, it's not clear where you're supposed to find them at all. Like, take Breath of the Wild, for instance. This is a game I don't really like, so I don't normally praise it, but this is something it did well. To increase your hearts and stamina, you get spirit orbs from shrines. Shrines are all over the place, out in the open, they're brightly colored, they're distinctly shaped, you can spot one from a mile away and go, hey, there's a shrine. Let's go there. Plus, there are big towers throughout the world designed specifically to help you find them, too. Erdtree fragments have no such marker, at least nothing consistent enough to form a helpful pattern, so they end up being scattered seemingly randomly throughout the world. Like, I feel like I'm on an Easter egg hunt, but 90% of what I find is like, oh, smithing stone 2, sweet. So if someone is frustrated by the difficulty, they most likely aren't going to spend long slowly scouring the world for these fragments, they're just going to look it up. And if they don't look it up, they might just quit. Second, there's supposed to be an incentive to explore, but we didn't need more of that. People explore in the base game to find dungeons, fight bosses, get gear and spells, and use that gear and spells to repeat the process. Shadows of the Erdtree has plenty of that. So in other words, we've created a new problem where all of the enemies have inflated stats, and you have to search for these needles in a haystack, these fragments in a Shadowland, if you will, which is an obnoxious chore due to lack of direction. For what purpose? And the more I think about this mechanic, the more it baffles me. And like, I gathered plenty of fragments just fine, it just, like, why? Why did we even bother with this? Now I know the negative section is already longer than the positive one, but I need to bring up the level design of the DLC and how a lot of content is locked behind some weird obtuse bullshit. As an example, the Shadow Keep is divided into 2 sections that can't be accessed from each other. This isn't clearly communicated though, they don't really give you a reason to believe they aren't connected, so I spent probably an hour looking for an additional path that connected the 2 parts before just looking it up. Turns out, in order to access this other portion and reach the main boss, Mesmer, you have to find a different entrance to the keep entirely, which means going to these ruins here in a different area, finding this tiny hallway tucked away in the corner in order to reach Bonnie Village, and only then can you make it to the east entrance to the Shadow Keep, and only then can you continue. The only areas in the base game that are kind of hidden behind obtuse garbage are optional ones, nothing relevant to the main quests, but even then, you know, they made sense. If you want to find an area, you move towards them on the map and not away from them. This just left me thinking, what do I do? Where do I go? And you know what? That sucks. All they had to do was have a single way to interconnect the 2 parts of Shadowkeep. But there isn't one, unless there turns out to be a random-ass hidden wall in the corner of a room you can only reach by doing a triple backflip on a Saturday. There are more examples of this, like the Abyssal Woods entrance, but I don't want to drone on about this any longer, so I'll just leave it at that. Overall, this DLC can't seem to decide if it wants to be free and open or if it wants to be linear, and when it tries to go with both, it leads to this sort of, we don't know how to make a good Metroidvania style game, where they do a really bad job of conveying what to do next. I think I had to Google more stuff in this DLC than all of the base game. So hopefully you got a good glimpse of each side of the conversation. I agree with everything I said in this video, to be clear. This isn't like a hypothetical I'm presenting. I think there's a lot to love in this DLC, and there's also a lot of flaws. And I hope we can all be reasonable human beings and understand that for some people, the scaling difficulty is a satisfying part of the challenge, and for others, the inflated health and damage numbers are just not fun to deal with, regardless of whether or not it's technically fair or if we just need to get good or whatever. Some people really enjoy getting lost in a world and trying to track down where to go next, while for others, it's not as fun to flail about aimlessly searching for what to do. Maybe something I listed as a negative is actually a positive for you, or vice versa, and maybe that doesn't make sense to me, or to your friend, or to you/Riker did nothing wrong 43 on Reddit, but it doesn't have to make sense to anybody but you. I think it's a great DLC, but riddled with hard to ignore flaws, and you don't have to agree with that. Will what I'm trying to say actually get through to the intended targets? I don't know, probably not. People are probably just gonna be mad and scream at each other on the internet, like either way. I think there is one thing that we as Souls-like fans can agree on though, and that is that we are all insufferable.